Morning, morning. Happy Friday. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Let's see. Techie, could you read our culture piece this morning? Let me
Sure.
pull it up here and when you see that, let me know.
I see it. Freedom and responsibility.
Yeah, I want you to read number 9, $1 million metric.
Number 9, $1 million metrics. $1 million metric, percent of key seats filled with the right people for those seats. Seek greater than 90%. A, what are our key seats? How do we define those seats? What is green and clean? B, every manager must define what are the key seats under them and why. C, what does success look like in that role? Both inputs, actions, and outputs, results. D, right person equal L5 to third power plus start chart. Alignment on X and Y axes of culture and performance.
Yes, thank you. So I thought that was a good piece when we talk about, having the right people in the right seats. And, our goal is to seek for at least 90% or more of the right people in the right seats. And so, part of that is defining what the seats are and, what are the key seats and what they are and what is green and clean. That comes from Covey. And then, we want to understand that story. We've talked about that story in the past. If you need some refresher, you're always welcome to reach out for that. But
and then 176 in the 7 habits.
Say that again, Ted.
It's page 176, I think, in the 7 habits.
Okay, so if you don't have that book, borrow it or find it or whatever. But it's a great story and a true story. So, and then, just making sure we understand what success looks like when we're talking about, these positions and then L5 leadership. We've talked about that in the star chart a few times. So again, if you need more definition, it's in these documents, but you can also reach out to somebody and we can give more. The star chart is in the document. So everything there to kind of help you in your position. So any other comments on the culture piece? Nope, nothing. Okay. we will turn it over to Ted for our lesson today. We do have, I know that Shane's going to either be late or not be on at all, but.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Even I guess back east, it's still a good morning. Just to sum up, I sent this out, but just bring us up to speed what we talked about last week. This is kind of what you guys said. Leaders, someone people follow. Why do we follow people? Because of trust and safety, being worthy of trust, and the 5 C's. And I said we're going to talk about those later, and we'll talk about those today, right now. They're going where we want to go. We buy in or have alignment with them. We believe in them, that they have transparency, honesty, integrity. Sorry, we believe them. I think the second one is we believe in them, which would be we believe their vision, where we buy into them. We can relate to them. They're a wise guide. Holistic alignment. I don't even remember what that one meant. Just think again, it's probably alignment. If anybody remember what that one was?
I'm not sure who gave that one.
All right. Impact. That was Joe's. They have we have communication and coordination, and you can do that. They lead by example. Coach versus leaders versus managers versus mentors. They can get us something we want. we all have a sales aspect. We need to convince people that we know what we're doing, that they should follow us. And compliance versus following or followership. All right, and then we had these outcomes. The biggest one, I think, is results. They need to create a vision. They need to attract and keep top talent. They need to be aligned with the company's purpose, values, mission, vision. They need to have growth, clear communication. They actualize what you're seeking. They inspire and engage commitments from top talent. They develop and align and focus top talent. They have diversification and love and caring. So, any comments before I move into the 5 C's? Okay,
Nope.
so we will just talk about these and then we'll go into more asking you questions phase. But I mean, this will be, you guys can read this and then decide if you have comments or questions. So these are just what I think it means to be partly worthy of trust. It would be the 5 C's and then the level 5 leader that we talked about last week. And that's in our culture documents. That's from the Good to Great book. So first off, one way to think of being worthy of trust is think about somebody that you would, let's say your daughter had a heart problem and you were going to let somebody open up her chest and operate on her heart. What makes that doctor worthy of trust? Or if you were going to give you worked your whole career and you saved $100,000 and that was your life savings and you were going to give it to somebody to manage or to invest, what would make that person worthy of trust? And so it's not just about being honest. That doctor could be very honest and yet you wouldn't want him to operate on your daughter. Or on the other hand, I guess the financial advisor could be dishonest, but he could be incredibly competent and smart and sophisticated and shrewd and all kinds of stuff, but you may not want to impart him your life savings because of that lack of honesty. So it's a lot more than just being honest. So we'll start with character. This is what I think character means. Any comments or things you guys have on character? It's kind of pretty clear, but Carrie, what do you think? What would you add to character?
When I think of character, some of those things need to kind of jump out. If it's like a doctor, for example, a reputation that's out there and that character shows, with what's going on, people talking, all that kind of stuff. I think making sure that that person has, that ability to be able to be seen and I think it's a really important piece that we need to have as far as making those decisions when you use those examples. So that's a really strong one for me. And I think a lot of that shows by reputation or whatever that comes out.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of my favorite things with character are what do you do when nobody is around? What do you do when nobody will find out? At least you think nobody will find out. What do you do when nobody's watching? How do you treat those that are in your mind beneath you? Meaning, you have authority over them, or whether it's a person at a gas station or a waitress or somebody that works for you or somebody that takes care of your yard, or how do you treat others like that? I think those are signs of character. All right.
Treat the janitor.
Yeah. I'll skip to number 4 just because with the 2 examples I gave. Obviously with the doctor and probably the money advisor, you'd want competence. And I think nobody wants to follow an incompetent leader. And I think to be worthy of trust, you need to have a level of confidence. Otherwise, whether it's whatever the skill is, you're going to have your house painted, if you're going to have an attorney drop some documents, if you're going to have whatever done, your oil changed in your car, you assume that there's competence there and you are seeking competence. So I think people are looking for competence in their leaders. Go back to number 2, commitment. Again, if that doctor is not committed to the same outcome you are and is not committed to your daughter's safety and health, even if it'd be hard to say he had character if he lacked that commitment, but he could be anyway, that one gets a little hard. It's like, then why is he even making himself an option? But let's say maybe he didn't want to do the surgery and you're trying to talk him into it. But he still had a character. But you definitely want people to have the commitment that they're committed to the company, they're committed to the team, they're committed to the cause. And if they lack that, even if they have some of the other things that's not there. Another one could be capacity. Maybe the doctor's so busy, or the contractor's a very good contractor, but they overcommitted themselves and, they're 9 months behind. And they somehow agree to do your job, and yet they're always just stalling you out because they lack the capacity. And in some cases, it could be like, let's go to work. It could be the emotional capacity to be the manager or to deal with the stress or the problem at hand. It could be the mental capacity to deal with the stress and the problems and the challenge at hand. It could be a really complex, hard problem. There could be lots of different parts of capacity, but if we don't have the capacity, then I don't know that we can lead. And then the last 2, confidence. I think people want to feel safe. They want to follow somebody with confidence and put their trust in someone with confidence. And then I believe curiosity. I don't know that that's one that everybody looks to say, I'm looking for a curious surgeon or a curious person to change my oil or a curious attorney, but I believe that's a great quality in life that makes people open and suggestible and persistent. A lot of those books that I've talked about that say anything can be learned, memory, intelligence, whatever it is, problem solving. And one of the best things they show is that a lot of people give up after, they give people some really hard problems or some impossible ones. And some people try for like 3 minutes and then they're like, nah, I'm done. I quit. Some people try for 5-6 minutes and then they give. Some people tell themselves a different story and they don't get even super frustrated or angry. They just are curious and they're like, well, what about this? What about that? What if this happened? What is this? I do think one of the great keys in business is asking questions. And if you're not getting the results you want, you're not asking the right questions. You're not asking good enough questions. And so I think the answer is always in the questions, and you got to ask good questions, and that comes from curiosity. All right.
I think a lot of, sorry, Ted, I think a lot of industries too. I mean, it's part of their business, whether it be medical, whether it be the insurance industry, they have to do continuing education to be able to carry on. And, I know some of them are probably like, yeah, I got to have to go do it. And others are probably like, I get to go learn some new things that have come up in my industry, and I should be excited about and curious about those new things.
Yeah, and I think there's some things that we are curious about and others that we aren't. I don't know that everybody's curious about everything, or that you're more curious about some stuff, latest HR compliance standards. I wouldn't be super excited to go to a seminar on that or some stuff, but maybe it is, but it'd be like, hey, what about the latest research in organizational behavior and human dynamics and how this or that, or whatever stuff in our thing, the latest recruiting tactics, the latest social media and marketing tools that can help grow your business, or, all those things make you want to learn and can be curious about. Yeah, Shantae?
Yeah, that was one of the things I picked up on the video that you sent us, the Tony Robbins video. At the very end of the video, he was asking him about millennials and what he thinks that looks like for the future. And I really honed into the part where he said that, we're so quick to kind of dismiss this younger generation because we think that they don't have the work ethic and this, that, and the other. But there's so many things about them that are promising because they grew up in a time where curiosity is key. They truly believe that they can find answers to anything they want. They can learn how to do anything they want to with the internet, and they're great problem solvers. And so I think when we talk about, in previous conversations, we've mentioned how we need to get fresh blood and keep fresh talent coming in and that kind of thing. I think that's something to remember is like, this younger generation is curious. They are the problem solvers. They're used to finding information at their fingertips, and they know where to look for it. They know how to find solutions. And so they stay curious about a lot of different things. And I think that's something like important to remember.
I love that. I agree. Thank you. All right. The last one was from Good to Great, level 5 leader. Can anybody describe what you think a level 5 leader is, or what you've heard it described as, or what you saw that I had written there? Anybody willing to tell us about a level 5 leader? Being the last one to see, I'm not going to call on you, but it's funny. It puts you in the hot seat, Shantae. That, at least for me, that's all I can see is you. Makes me feel like you're in the hot seat. You're not in the hot seat, but and I can't even see who else is there to call on somebody.
I mean, I can take a stab at it.
Sure. I wasn't.
Okay.
I was actually just kind of making fun of the process that you're frozen in my screen here, but sure. Thank you. Take a stab at it.
I think the way I understand it is a level 5 leader is just like top tier talent.
Well, that is an important part of leadership. What he specifically talked about, and maybe before I say it, looks like Techie and Joe, I don't know who was first, have a comment.
You can go, Joe.
Yeah, so I agree with Shantae when saying it's a top tier leader or top tier talent. In Jim Collins' version was, I guess he said, a powerful mixture of two different things. And that was, if I remember right, in Indomitable Will, which is hard to say. And I think the other one was humility. I think he actually said, was it personal humility? So it's kind of this mixture of these two things. And there's more components to it than that, but I think it's a level 5 leader is a leader that has those two innate capabilities in growing their teams.
Thank you. Do you have any more to add, Techie?
No, that was it.
Okay. And I think the key he emphasized is that their indomitable will is for the team and the company to succeed.
Yeah.
Not so much. There's nothing wrong with having indomitable will to say, I'm going to be a billionaire or whatever your goals are. But that didn't meet the standard for him. It was to say they have an indomitable will and an indomitable spirit and a huge desire, and that they are going to succeed. The company is going to succeed. The team is going to succeed. Everything that, really just that, the team and the company is going to be successful. But yet they kind of had a window and a mirror type leadership, where when things went wrong, they looked in the mirror. When everything went right, it was a window, and they looked out at the team and reflected and gave other people sight. So they weren't trying to get just honors and prestige themselves. They weren't trying to win the Entrepreneur of the Year, or they weren't trying to have they wanted to have just the corporate jet or whatever we would think are the normal trappings of that. And in the book, Good to Great, they talk about a lot of, and the book is always contrast. These companies went from good to great. These companies didn't. And so in each principle, they have contrasting ones where like, hey, these 4 leaders met this thing and this is what they were like. You know, they just kept pushing and were persistent that they were going to succeed. And yet they drove an old pickup and they didn't do this or that, or they weren't flashy. They didn't look like what you think of as a big corporate leader. And then they're like, these guys, you know, he went around in a limo and he made a private executive dining room that only the top 4, you know, they spent $100,000 a month at the company for these 4 people to have lunch, and they did this and this. You see all the trappings of success and wealth, and that's what those non-level 5 leaders focused on. So that's kind of what they were showing with open, humility, teachable, and then the window and the mirror. Did you unraise your hand, Joe?
Oh, I re-raised my hand. Sorry.
I saw
get
that,
out of
and I saw it come back down. I thought, okay, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So I'm really enthralled right now by this book, Multipliers. I'm going through it for a second time. And something kind of, as you were talking, kind of popped into my mind about it. And he kind of asks the audience or the reader this question. He says, you know, who feels like more that the company or your organization is asking for more and more and more and to do more with less? Does anyone feel that way? And almost everyone's like, yeah, I think everyone. It's like, is it also true that you guys feel like you're not being utilized at your highest capacity in your organization? And I found that second one kind of interesting. It's like, so we've got these 2 paradoxes going on. And here's what he said. So most people in organizations are underutilized. All capability can be leveraged with the right kind of leadership. And that means intelligence and capacity can be multiplied with the right type of leadership. I think that's a little bit towards the heart that, and that's the idea of this book is for all us to become multipliers, not diminishers or someone who takes away from it. I think that ties really nicely into level 5 leadership. But sorry if I did a little bit too much of a sidestep here, but it just was really fascinating to me to see how these different leadership books kind of really interconnect in such a great way.
No, I was actually going to talk about Multipliers. It may be a different book. The one I was going to reference was by Liz.
Oh, I just have the updated one.
By Liz
they
Wiseman.
released a new version of it, but just updating some concepts. And so he was kind of talking about kind of this new world.
Yeah, she was she worked for Mitt Romney at Bain and Company. She was a consultant there, Liz Wiseman.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then but the thing I liked about, because you know, there's always this concept there'll be a level 5 leader, but it's like, okay, what is a level 5 leader? And one of my favorite traits that I think that to me spoke to a level 5 leader, just any kind of a great leader. I don't know that it fits into that definition. For some reason in my mind, I always thought, oh, that's what a level 5 leader is, but it really doesn't fit with the definition. But I would say, let's just say, call it great leadership. Is she talks about, and I think I've brought this up before, the Highland rugby team. She talks about Larry Gelwick, this guy in Sugar House, Utah, you know, here in Salt Lake. And he's does like he's a travel agent. And that's really not the relevant thing, but the high school, it wasn't even a sanctioned high school team. It was just high school age kids in a club were the premier rugby team in the United States at any age. Now, the United States is not as good as South Africa or New Zealand or Australia in rugby, but they were these collection of high school kids were the preeminent team in the country. And she talks about his coaching style, and really what he did is he identified people's potential. He'd just sit in his lawn chair on the side and watch him practice. Then he'd pull a kid over and say, hey, come here, you know, come talk to me. And he'd be like, do you realize how fast you are? No, I didn't. You know, you could do this. And do you realize you could do this? And I see this in you. And he would just discover, he was curious, and he would sit and watch, and he would discover people's potential and greatness and strengths within them. So he was kind of like a human strength finder. And I thought that was a great element of leadership that really speaks to that. And didn't do what you normally think of as a coach. And they didn't walk up and down the sidelines yelling and screaming. Didn't sit and micromanage. Pass, 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 pass. You know, you watch, it's so funny to watch some of a lot of little league sports. And I've coached, I've coached, and I've coached, and I've coached, and I've coached. And I don't know that I'm right or wrong, but most coaches sit and scream at the players, and they literally, and the parents do the same thing. I mean, it's like they're calling it like they're a play-by-play announcer. Now pass, stop, shoot, don't, you know, I mean, they just yell at the kids every second. And it bothers parents that I just sit there and watch, you know, and I've actually gotten more vocal just to shut the parents up, because they're like, why aren't you coaching? But, you know, different views of coaching. I don't know that a coach, you know, I think they set things in motion and can build the kids up, and the coaching happens at practice. But it's funny to watch most coaching, even at the pros, you know, where they pace up and down the sidelines. I like the coaches. I think the good ones, I mean, some of them have a nervous energy that they walk, but the coaching's not done there at that time. And I like that aspect of coaching, to just find the best in your people.
If
All
you
right.
haven't watched Ted Lasso, that's exactly his style. He's not making, it's like, you guys have practiced, go play the game. It just was very interesting watching Ted Lasso, and I kind of really enjoyed the whole thing of what's happening during the game, because he's managing the game, not the players, like timeouts and other things, but he's not managing what the players are doing, like maybe a little coaching after play is over and they come to the sideline, but it's not, you know, hollering at the team. So if you haven't watched Ted Lasso, those were a couple fun seasons they had.
Yeah, and a coach that knows nothing about the sport, but it's kind of like a leader that, I mean, to me, business is business is business. We've said, and I've said, and I'm quoting Drucker, so this isn't my thing, but the purpose of any business is to attract and keep a customer. That's why any business on the planet, from a dentist to a person that cuts lawns to Apple Computer, that's why you exist, and that's how you exist. And then we talk about the methods of business is strategy to use to create sustainability, that you stay around and you can keep attracting customers, and to compete with people and do it successfully to win that customer. And then you compete for margin, and strategy creates sustainability and margin. But every business, those things, and it's all about people, that people are the ones that always do the work. And then, like we said in the Simon Sinek video, the managers and leaders, you know, the managers manage the people that do the work, and the leaders manage the managers that manage the managers that manage the people that do the work. And so that really doesn't change regardless of what business you're at. And I think it's the same with sports. I don't know that it's an X's and O's thing. Now, the one guy in that show, the bad coach or whatever, he's an X's and O's guy, and he does know a lot of strategy. And so there's some value there. But at the end of the day, I think most of us could pop into any business and succeed if we understand the principles of people and the principles of business and leadership, because they apply across the board, because we're all trying to just attract customers and to keep them, and to differentiate ourselves from competitors with strategy, so that we have more sustainability and more margin. That's what competition is to say, can I succeed and grow more than you can? And can I win more customers than you can? And can I do it with more margin than you can? That's the nature of competition in business. So, and I think that's universal pretty much across all businesses. So, and I've probably owned, I don't know, let's make up a number. It's probably 100 businesses, and some of them similar, you know, where it's in, I mean, not that similar, but you could say, you know, the Maersk, where we did IntegraCore with 3PL fulfillment, and trucking was another one, and staffing. You could say, well, those three are kind of similar. But I mean, a lot of my stuff's from a cell phone company to a multi-level company to food trucks to restaurants to real estate things. I mean, it's all over the place. So, and I do think everything's pretty similar. All right, let's talk about two things. And this is, you guys are going to have to answer because I don't have this. I'll just ask the question. How do we evaluate and how do we develop, or I'll say improve? So if you're now CEO of some company and you're going to go build your tier 1 leadership team that reports to you, how are you going to evaluate the candidates that are coming in that are leader? Or let's say you're a consultant and you're not going to do anything and you're going to look at all the leadership in a company from the CEO down or even the board down, and you're tasked with saying, okay, you got to go interview and find the people that you're going to put in there, or you're the consultant and you're going to go, they've asked you to go evaluate or help develop and improve this team in leadership. So how do we evaluate? How do we develop leadership? Carrie?
So I think for me, the first thing we've got to do again is go back to the culture piece that we read this morning. You know, what are the key seats? What is success in those seats? You know, have we defined what those key seats are? And then we have to look at the individuals and find out, you know, did they do those things? You know, were they successful? Did they bring in the results from those pieces? And you know, do we now look at them and say, can they achieve that next level because of their performance in the past, based on what success looks like, and you know, what do those the definition of those key seats, what they are.
They have resume, experience, traits that suggest they will succeed. Did I get that last part right?
Yeah. Have they, you know, how do they compare to the definition of the, you know, of those key seats and the job that they're in? You know, how do they compare to those in performance? So yeah.
Anybody else? Ashley?
So it won't really happen at the resume state, but you really need to make sure, I think, that their values align with yours. You just have to be on the same page as far as values and culture go.
Thank you. Yeah, Tara?
Yes, I look at the willingness, the motivation, but behind a person, their energy, their willingness to want to learn. I want to piggyback off of what Ashley said as well. The culture, you know, how they're willing and able to adapt to the culture as well of the business. Their ability to be trained and develop and talk. And I kind of seek too to see if I find any innate abilities that's in them, just that natural fire that's in them and that passion for the task.
Yeah, thank you. We're going to talk a lot about lists. We'll go through lists of leadership traits, and I even put some out in that paper last week that we'll talk about, whether it's today or next week when we get to them. And then maybe in future weeks we will have lists. I have list upon list of traits, but you know, there's not. The point I want to make with that is that there's not one size fits all. I mean, there's a few things that probably really matter, but the other ones is like we each have our own style and we do not have to bend and conform, and we don't all have to mimic, let's say, me here. there's multiple paths towards success, but the key is that it needs to be in line with our environment and core values. That's why it's always important to put those first, so that you understand what you're measuring against. But some environments of a company are very aggressive and very totalitarian, very demeaning, very competitive. And, if that's where you thrive and where you want to work, that's great. And they can succeed, and they can succeed very well, and maybe even more so than an environment like ours. Other environments want to be kind of more passive, and they want to be more this or that, and other ones want to be very creative and independent, and then there's styles within those and there's different combinations of styles to be like, well, maybe me as a leader, I'm X, Y, and Z, I'm these 5 traits, and that's great. I mean, when I took the Strength Finder, for example, I felt like I failed it. How do you fail a personality test? But I did. In my mind, my number one strength is competition, and I don't like that. But I see that actually everything in life is a competition to me, from when I'm driving, and not really with anybody else, but with myself. I'm seeking excellence in every moment of every day. If I'm riding a bike on a mountain bike ride, it's how do I shave 5 seconds off this ride? How do I cut this corner a little tighter? If I'm trying to go in traffic, how can I cut, like I now even use GPS, even though I know where I'm going, because I want to outsmart traffic. I look for in the shop at the grocery store, I sit and evaluate which line and what are the probabilities that each line is going to be quicker than this. And, I mean, everything in life is a competition to me. And it's annoying to my wife. Like, we got to make this light, or we got to do this, or we got to get on the plane first, because it makes me a little bit intense too. But that's probably been a lot of the factors for the things that have gone well for me. And it isn't even one I really wanted to have. So there isn't a right set of traits when we get into traits. I still think it's worth thinking about what are some potential traits. So we'll spend some time there. Maybe we won't spend as much time as I maybe initially thought. Maybe we'll just put out the lists and you can chew on them and think for yourself. But just realize there is not one set of traits and strengths and some list that you have to hit. I have to be a visionary leader. I have to be charismatic. That's in the Good to Great book. What everybody thinks of as a leader, or you see in a movie as some big rich corporate CEO, that's not really the ones that succeeded. Not that they didn't make a lot of money or whatever, but they just didn't fit that mold of the trapping. So we aren't looking for one set of prescription. You can succeed and lead in your own way, and you are going to succeed much more by playing your strengths and being true to yourself than to try to copy someone else. And so anyway, just FYI on that stuff. All right. What else, Carrie?
I was just going to mention this, and you brought it up, but I think, we do have our strengths assessments. I would want to look at their strengths and get an idea, get a feel for, where they're coming from internally, and how that matches with the, with the seat. I think, we're putting time and effort and money into having those, and I think we should use those, when we're looking to, promote somebody or move them into a different position, or having them taking the hero's path. What do those assessments, strengths assessments say, and how do we play to their strengths so that they can be as successful as possible?
Yeah, and I do think we play the odds with those. And so that's what we're going to do. And we were going to do a few of them. One, I think we're pretty committed to doing the Gallup Strength Finder. And so that will be, we're just going to learn how to implement and utilize and think about that more and more. But I think we'll at least use one other metric that does some type of people's, and I think most of them, some of them have 6 factors and 4, but a lot of them go with, where are you at on the thing of drive? Like I'll use the DISC test, for example, or for some people know the color coder, but someone's a very driven, a person that's really, really driven and they're just going. And that is one way to succeed as a leader, but there's other people that can be a very people person, a relator. And a lot of times that high D or a red personality doesn't necessarily make them a people person. And sometimes they can be as well, and sometimes they can't, but they still could drive them towards success. And someone else could have success by being a high S or a blue, which a lot of relatability to people. They make everybody feel good. They build the team. Now, if you just sit there in that, you're not going to accomplish stuff, but you can still drive towards excellence from that personality. Sales is one that I profiled a lot in my career. And but there's a lot of different, and a different type of product requires a different type of sales. A technical sell would probably have a more engineer type that would be a high C or a white. I'm still using those models. Another one would be a very yellow, they call them a golden retriever or no, that's the blue. An otter, a playful person that's loves to have fun and is just driven by energy and entertainment. And, that could be a salesperson. So there's, even within sales, there would be a standard. You say, well, most ones, this is what fits, but there's a lot of ways to succeed in all these. But we are also going to profile and play the odds and say, yeah, there is a million ways to succeed, but we're going to try to stack the odds in our favor and pick the profile that seems to have the best chance of doing what we're doing. And there's variations of those, but we don't want to discriminate. We don't want to miss opportunities, but we are going to also factor that in and try to play the odds, which is the point of doing those. All right. What else? I'll add one. And then as I'm evaluating somebody to leadership, I would say, do they want to lead? Joe has this little thing. What's your thing, Joe? Do they want it? Do they see it? Do they
GWC, do they get it? Do they want it? And do they have the capacity?
get it? So
so it's interesting. Yeah. So do they get it? It's like they understand what the gig is, but just because you understand it doesn't mean you have the capacity to do it. And we actually had this conversation last week, is like, how many balls can you juggle at once, kind of a thing, right? How many things can you manage? Time, space, or being able to see so far into the future. There's folks that are just more tactical today, and there's others that can have a little bit more or higher vantage point on these things. But if they don't get it, it's going to be difficult. If they don't want it, you can't have what you don't want, because often, sometimes it comes that way, but if they don't want it, you're fighting an uphill battle on a desire. And then capacity is the last one. So
thank you. So as part of it, do they want it? Are they willing to do it? Are they able to lead? And then part of it is also, do you hire that? If we're going to go revamp our leadership thing, do we take what's there and develop it and grow it? And then versus how much of leadership is just in people, and how much needs to be stimulated and grown and developed. And it is easier to hire when it's within people, but on the other hand, I've had experience where I hired leadership that had it went back to Ashley Labram's question. They were pretty much aligned. I thought they were like 90% aligned, and that was enough with the culture and the values and me. But the 90% wasn't, at the end, turned out to not be enough. I think, it was really culture shock for the company. I hired basically the CEO. I still stayed a CEO, but they were the president. And then I got a new CFO, and then everybody reported to them. And it was just a shock, even though they had the ability. So I'm talking about hiring leadership, and they had the ability to take a company to $1 billion, and the existing leadership or the prior leadership team didn't, and the new people they brought in. But I saw firsthand the importance of culture, and even it wasn't a huge misalignment, but it was enough that it created dissonance. And it was, so it's not always just as easy to hire leadership, even though it's you kind of need to do both, I think. But and what was surprised me is that, I don't know what the magic number is on alignment, but there was enough. Because these were good people trying to do the right thing, trying to be aligned with me, but there was enough of misalignment that it just on the culture pieces and stuff, like, let's say, doing a class like this, they just wanted to get rid of things like this, which were employee development or leadership things that I had, or just little things like that, but they cumulatively added up. So that's kind of a challenge. It is hard to try to develop something that's maybe not in someone. And on the other hand, it's the same thing with culture. You can't really develop a culture or belief system in somebody that's not in them. All the better. Why it's so important to have that codified ahead of time. I think I've said this a few times, but for the sake of repetition, or in case I haven't, or in case some of you weren't here, my formula for business is why. And there's a book, Simon Sinek, Start with Why. Mine, I've never thought of it in terms of that, but that's in essence what it is. But it is purpose and mission and values and vision, and just who are we and what are we going to stand for, and why are we doing this, and why are we even in business? How do we want to make a difference in the world? What are we trying to do here? And that matters more than anything. And I would start there, because then everything else cascades from there. Then I would go to what Jim Collins says, first who, then what. I would go to the who and get the right who's and get them in the right seat. It isn't so much even having the right people, but you got to get the right person in the right seat. And you have to understand what that seat, like Carrie said, is expected. So then I would go to who, and then you go to the what. And what is what business we're in, and what are our goals? Where do we see ourselves in 5 years, 3 years, 1 year? Are we heading towards up towards Toronto? Are we going down to Buenos Aires? Are we going to go over to the Middle East? Where are we heading as an organization, and what are some milestones to get there? And then what's our strategy to do that? And again, ultimately, the point of strategy is to create sustainability and margin in the game of attracting and keeping customers and doing it better than anybody else. And those are really the pillars. And then you try to build processes and procedures, communication and coordination, ways to make sure that you are staying synced up and accountable, and that you understand what does success look like, what did you commit to, and what do we need to be to by certain dates, and are we on the same page, and do we trust each other? And we do all those things that create then team momentum and belief, and alignment and efficiency, so that we're rowing together. But in that sense, it always goes back to, you can't build any of that if you don't have a clear why and have that in place, and then you got to get the right people. So, all right, let's move on to the next. Anything else you guys would think of that you would want to do to evaluate leaders or to develop leaders?
Because I'm still so stuck on multipliers. Go ahead, Kyle.
I'd say, do they fill a gap that is existing in the organization? And I think a lot of that is actually analyzing your organization and becoming aware of the gaps there. And you're going to get a diverse leadership, or employees that cover a lot of the bases, but there will be gaps. And so when we hire new people, it's important to know those gaps and to and to gear those discussions around those gaps to see if your new hire is going to truly fill the most needed missing piece in the organization. I think that is a real key to moving the needle and getting to the next level.
Well, and it's seeking diversity, but maybe not what we would call for diversity's sake in the old sense. And what it means is probably seeking diversity at a deeper level than people look at someone to say, well, they're, they have a different skin color than me, or they're from a different part of the country, or they're a different gender. Normally diversity is, I think people just don't take it beyond that to say, what do they look like? Where are they from, and what's their gender, which would be part of look like, I guess. And I think that's what people think of as diversity, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's fantastic. Even those are different perspectives. But I think we could go deeper in diversity of talents, diversity of strengths, diversity of backgrounds, diversity of life views, expectations. Yeah. So diversity is a good thing. But I don't know that I always love it as much just for diversity's sake to say, I need to have this many people that check this box and this many people that check. I mean, that's like a quota system that's, I think, counterproductive. We just want a diverse team with a lot of different opinions and different views, and the safety to share those and to be who you are. So,
and ultimately, that's what diversity and inclusion is it really is that deep of a level of things. It's not just the surface level that we kind of hear in the narratives out there.
No,
it really is.
When you hand it to the government or to the court system or something to then identify and create, then it becomes a quota system, and we've ruined the concept of sort of diversity. And that's not, at least for me, what I would be seeking. That would be, it is all those things that probably that someone would originally said it, say, that's what we were aiming for anyway, was a variety of ideas, variety of backgrounds, variety of different thoughts and strengths and talents, and a variety of people. They don't, that those things we want come from different people from different countries or different experiences, and different, that they look different and act different and think different, because we want that. But I think with the, all the things that have happened in the social system within the country, that it becomes just a checklist to say it's just a head count. And I don't think we're seeking that here. And we don't have to, because we're not some government agency or something. So, all right, anything else? One thing to do, I think, on Evaluate, I think behavioral, we won't get into those. I think we may have even done it back in the management section, but behavioral interviewing questions are a really good way to identify that, to think about what are your key, what are the key traits you're looking for in this role or in this thing. And doesn't mean that has to be their ultimate strength, but you can still test for some trait that you want and create a situational behavioral interview question, which is like, tell me about a time when this and this happened and how you dealt with it. Tell me about a time when, any more you want to add to behavioral questions, Kyle? I think that's a great interviewing method. It's kind of any more 30-second more blip you want to add to what I've said?
I think just in asking questions in general, you want to see that that people can speak at a deep level about their experience. I don't know if anyone here is aware of knows of the Ben Bloom's taxonomy. Maybe that's something to look at. But when people can speak at the analysis, synthesis, evaluation levels of that on their experience, then you really know that they probably have that experience. When they speak at an application level, I mean, this may not make sense to you, but this is this is what how I treat interviews. When they speak at an application level, it may not be so deep into that experience, and then they bring in other things, cultural noise and whatnot, that you want to catch on to, and you're interviewing a person and getting good information when they can really speak at that deep level about their experience. Part of that is knowing a bit of what you're having, knowing a bit about that yourself, but you can always tell when someone probably knows more than you about something, when they can just speak at such a deep level, when you're learning things from those people. And I think behavioral questions, real or situational questions, kind of set up, they set people up for your ability to see how deeply they think or get into those things. I mean, without them, things are very surface. So I just think they're a great tool to use. And you can't do it as like, you have a few behavioral questions on a thing and you just kind of go down a list and see how they respond. Okay, well, they got through the questions. You really want to see how deeply they think and how they analyze and how they create and what judgment they use in situations.
So let me sum that up before we hand it to Joe. I think behavioral questions interviewing requires a little more, I would say, pre-work on your part to think about what is it that you're looking to discover, what are the traits you're looking for, and then creating the right type of questions that can discover that. And then, like Kyle just said, don't just do a surface level, go through and ask the 5 questions and see what they did. You need to then follow that thread and have a lot of follow-up impromptu questions where you're trying to look at integration to say, that's just who they are. That's not them answering a question. I pushed enough on that situation that I'm clear that that is deeply integrated into them. I think that's the 3 parts. Know what you're looking to identify. So you got to know the role and the trait you're looking for. Build a set of questions that you think seek to situationally and experientially in that person's through an experience shows that they have that trait. And then you've got to dig at it and pull on the thread to make sure what you're really seeking is integration, to know that that's who they are. That is not just something they read about or can give you a 30-second answer on. You have to show that that's literally how they acted in that situation. So thank you. Joe.
Yeah, just some tools to echo what you guys are saying. I guess one of those, one thing to kind of support, I love hearing about, how Musk thinks, Elon Musk, and his whole thing about this is because he hires engineers all the time. He asked them, what was the most complicated challenge you had to solve? He says the people who are fakers, just like Kyle was saying, they can't they're at the application level, not in the weeds. It says people who know how to solve those complicated problems and had to solve them. They know the details of how they solved them. And because they had to live it, and they can very articulately tell you how they had to go about it. Now, interviewing, I've found, is a very high stress environment for most interviewees. And one of the tools that I've found to really take that stress away is to get more tactical in the way that you ask some of these questions. So I agree with Ted saying is start with, like, I would call it a scorecard. What is it that you want and you're trying to get, and how important is it? And that way you can really identify, am I looking for the behaviors, or am I just talking about interesting things in an interview? And then this comes from who the A method of hiring is, try to get people situationally in context in their mind. So example to do that is to say something like, in this specific role, right? Get them in a time and in a place. You get more genuine answers, and you also take the stress away from the interview, because they now no longer have to create an answer. They're now just telling you what happened in that time and in that place. So for example, I guess you could say something like, hey, in this specific role, what was the most, challenging thing you had to overcome while at that organization? That's one way you could get there. You can dive a little bit deeper. Any way you can do to get somebody mentally in a time and in a place will make a big difference when it comes to getting a more organic answer. And then watch body language, closed off or, leaning forward, leaning back, engaged, disengaged. But again, to Kyle's point, they'll know the details if they're, they'll be at a very tactical and deep level when you can get them in that headspace.
Awesome. Thank you. Belinda?
So just to add on to your point number 6 there about how do we have skill, talent, personality gap in the organization? That's not something that is just suck it out of your thumb. It should be a more analytical approach, in the sense that you need to first of all know what your gaps are. And this is where the Clifton tool comes in so handy, because we've done these evaluations of ourselves now, and we know what our team members are good at and where we have gaps. And you need to have that knowledge so that you know what you're looking for. And then when you're looking, of course, the behavioral interview is an extremely valuable and effective tool. And you back that up with, with an assessment, with a personality assessment, and look in the assessment what this person's strengths are, and whether you see your deal breaker, weaknesses, strengths, or whatever you're going to say. Well, they have to have this, at least they have to have that. But then also what you see that they are strong at that you don't have on your team a lot of, and what they bring to the table. And that's where to me the diversity is the just so valuable, because one diversity, like you said, it becomes a quota, it becomes a number. It's not. If it is, you miss the point. You miss the point. You won't get the value out of it. The value of the diversity is that different mindset, that different perspective, that different, experience that these people bring to the table, so that we can become whole through inclusion and as a team. And between all the team members, you have every strength that we could think of wanting to be successful, we have in the team together, as opposed to one person being the hero or everybody being a hero and they all have these strengths. That doesn't work. That's not smart. You'll have blind spots if you do that.
Thank you. And that's not something I've done well at least intentionally. I tend to think, oh, we want to have a we need to have somebody that's focused on marketing and has expertise there. And then I will interview people and look to see if Jessica, does she have the competence in that role and knows what she's doing? And I think she'd fit culturally with me and with us, for example, to do the CMO role. But I don't know that I sat and I've done a good job of thinking about, well, what does the whole team look like, and what type of other thing would be a complementary member of that team? And that's probably a third level. I think most of us just say, what's the skill gap I'm trying to fit? I need a marketer. And do they fit with us in the organization? And then what you tend to get is probably a lot of the same type of people, because you just take it that far, versus to say, what's another type of personality or strength that would really complement this team that they're on? So that's something I'm going to work on. All right, we get to end. I do want to just wrap this section up, so I'm going to hit 2 things. Integration and reinforcement. I believe a key thing is your orientation, that you have your first bit of work, your onboarding that happens in your first month or 2, and your orientation, onboarding, your engagement, and then integration, that you just continually drive the culture and these things in to people. I think that's a key point. And then the point of starting with why, because who are we as an organization? How do we act? How do we make decisions? How do we treat each other? That's so important, because then that creates an immune system. And sometimes, certain foods or waters, or if you just think of your body, there's not that there's anything inherently wrong. It's just that you aren't used to it. And so then you get sick if you go to Mexico and drink the water, maybe. And maybe someone else is like, no, I don't. I'm used to that bacteria. And it's not a bad bacteria. It's just a bacteria. But like if in the United States, you get not used to it, and you then get sick when you go there. And so we want to create a cultural immune system, that would be more than like a leadership and a talent immune system. That's got to be its own set of things to say, what are you accountable for? But we want a cultural immune system that says, this is, this person fits and they are aligned with us. If not, we want to be so clear about who we are that we literally get sick and they get sick, so to speak, and that we don't just endure something that's a wrong fit. So I do think that's an important piece to have as an organizational immune system, that we and we need to have good borders that say, let's keep, I think you can tell a lot about the strength of an organization. Are the borders to keep people in and try to keep you guys from fleeing, or is it to try to keep people out and to protect what we have here, to say we want we want the best people, we want them to fit, we want you to buy in, we want you to be aligned. And so I do think we need borders. That was our screening process and our testing and our strength finder and our personality test and the behavioral interviews and things that say, we want the right person because we value what we have here. It's special, it's important, and we're going to accomplish things, and not any person can just come in and be a part of this. It's an opportunity, and I'm going to protect that. And so our borders are hopefully keeping the wrong people out, not trying to force and trap the right people in. And then we want an immune system that, again, will help us self-correct when we make mistakes. All right, thank you. Sorry, went over a little bit. Next week's our last week this month, and then we will go to the once a month rotation starting in December. And I think next week we will we'll do some best practices and then we'll kind of start into a lot of the lists of traits and just sort of discuss what we think are certain leadership traits. Again, not one size fits all, but and so it'll be our last week of the weekly one, and then we'll go to the once a month after Thanksgiving.
Ted,
So
will you be sending this out? I've got this in Teams. I just want to make sure we update it or whatever.
What I typed today.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I just did a new document. Do you want me to add it to the one I sent last week?
Oh, okay. Well, I can if you want me to, or we can create a new one with this one.
Maybe just why don't you just add it however you want in Teams?
Okay.
I had a section in the document I sent out last week called How to Get There, How to Evaluate, but I didn't force that into this. I just asked the questions and type. So
okay. If you'll send this one to me, I'll add it.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day, great weekend.
See y'all.